Donald Trump has a New Year's resolution that flies in the face of the international order. He apparently wants to leverage the power of the presidency to threaten America's neighbors. In a series of posts on Christmas Day, Trump called for the U.S. to take control of the Panama Canal and buy Greenland. He also suggested Canada should become the 51st state. The only problem? The Panama Canal belongs to Panama. Greenland, it is not for sale. And Canada is, well, its own country. Whether this is all bluster, just a series of unhinged ideas, one thing is crystal clear. Trump plans to use his bully pulpit to intimidate our allies. But when it comes to China, he might be singing a slightly different tune. Just last night, Trump urged the Supreme Court to pause a law that would ban TikTok in the U.S. if the app is not sold by its Chinese parent company. Joining us now, MSNBC political analyst and professor of practice at Columbia University, Basil Smikle, and congressional reporter for The Washington Post, Mariana Sotomayor.
Mariana, welcome, both of you. I hope everyone had a great Christmas because there's a whole lot of stupid we got to get through. And so you are well girded, I hope, for the conversation. So let's start with this really smart idea that we're somehow now going to take control of Panama. And that we are, we want to go and buy Greenland. Why? Because it's there and it's green. And I guess that's what Donald Trump wants to do. So, Mariana, is there any appetite, do you think, from your reporting and your coverage of these things, with this incoming Congress, the idea that they're going to entertain legislation to to do these crazy fantasy-driven ideas of Donald Trump that somehow he not only wants to rule the U.S., but he wants to rule the world?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think obviously among Democrats and definitely among Republicans, they don't want to be doing this. There's so many things that this new Congress needs to do, not to mention literally raise the debt ceiling within the next couple of weeks. Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, mentioned that just yesterday night, saying this should be a priority of this Congress, even before Trump is sworn in. How are they even going to tackle something like this? Trying to go after other nations, trying to acquire other nations or other nations' properties. It's just something that, when I talk to congressional Republicans in particular, they say, no, don't take any of this seriously. Trump, when he wants to enter a negotiation, when he wants to get something, he usually says these platitudes to try and bring these countries to the table.
Okay.
Yeah, but obviously it is also a way that could alienate a lot of these countries who do want to help and are allies already.
Okay. Alicia?
No, there's no okay, Michael Steele, because when we were on the phone with our producers getting ready for this show, I heard you say the thing that I say almost, this is not how any of this works. This is not how any of, I don't even know how to frame this conversation because it's not how it works. And it's always sort of like two truths and a lie. Right, Basil?
Right.
Like there is him saying the fact that he feels that China now has too much influence in the Panama Canal, tying that to trade. But then the idea simply becomes he is going to take it over. I want to read you this. This is from The New Yorker, and it's Susan Glasser putting this in the broader context of Donald Trump's new governing ideology. She writes, whether it's preemptory attacks on a 1977 Panama Canal Treaty, whose terms he now wants to reject, or the fantastical reimagining of the January 6 rioters who stormed the U.S. Capitol as innocent martyrs, Trump is a conservative in an entirely different sense than the one we have come to know. He is not a Republican who sticks to the status quo, but instead a would-be strongman whose attachment to a past of his own imagining will now once again become the country's governing ideology. That, to me, is where the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely. When I first heard about the Panama Canal and Greenland, I was like, wow, imperialist much? I guess it's the world's sole remaining global power, superpower. This is our move, not expanding healthcare, not expanding mental health and making college affordable. It's going after sovereign nations. And what is concerning is that he treats our enemies better than he treats our friends. And I don't think this is real. It's a bargaining position of his. He said something like this with respect to Greenland before. It's a bargaining position. And I think the point you make about China is very important here, because if you pay attention to what's happening in the Caribbean, if you pay attention to what's happening in parts of Africa, particularly in the port cities in Africa, there is a strong Chinese presence in building those ports, in expanding their footprint and trade routes, and there is incredible amount of money being spent on infrastructure in those countries by China. Where is the U.S. in that? They are far, far behind. There's a solution to that doesn't include acquiring other nations and potentially putting boots on the ground. So I think it's a bargaining position in a way that is meant to sort of bring the center of power to him in that strongman sort of ideology. But at the same time, like, people need to be focused on other things.
Yeah, but it's the focus on other things that is where it gets really kind of crazy, because those other things include not just our relationships with foreign governments, or what we're seeing, which we'll talk about later, the emerging bro culture in this country, in the tech space that's creating some new landscapes. But it also goes to, I think, the selective nature of it all, because as Alicia noted coming into this, how Donald Trump is, hard on Greenland and Canada, right? But soft on China. I want to take a little bit of an ease on China, because there's some things I want to be able to do here. For example, he talks about this TikTok ban. You have the statement from Trump saying President Trump alone possesses the consummate deal-making expertise. Okay, so I'm not going to do editorial comments while I read this, so I'll just stay true to it. The electoral mandate and the political will not to negotiate a resolution to save the platform while addressing the national security concerns expressed by the government. Now, that all, Mariana, sounds rather normal, right? It's like, okay, can we roll? But there's always something else underneath it all. What are you seeing with this whole approach to China with respect to TikTok versus how we see the knock them down, break them up, and sort of bullying with respect to Greenland and Canada?
Yeah, there is a difference. And the fact that he is asking for a pause here is interesting. But he's literally going against a bipartisan, largely Republican support for banning TikTok. Like, this was Congress-driven. It was signed into law by President Biden. This is something that Republicans want. And I will say there is bipartisan will to actually go against China. Like, there is a committee in the House that is literally focused on countering China. They actually get along, which is pretty rare to see. So there could be a moment where Congress, again, produces legislation to be able to go against China in many a different way. And I think Basil is right. Like, the fact that China is in our backyard, that is something that you hear from Republicans and Democrats. They are building ports in South American countries to try and win over a lot of the soft power. And the U.S. is not there. So it is odd to see Trump, focus on other areas where he could really go strongly against China, because it is needed.
You had Miami Herald columnist Andre Oppenheimer just underscoring all of that, Basil. He writes, if the U.S. president-elect keeps making veiled threats of a U.S. invasion or economic sanctions against Panama, the Central American country will have little choice but to get support from wherever it can get it. China, Cuba, and Venezuela would be the first to offer help, and the net result of Trump's bravado could be pushing Panama into their hands. It, to me, is the problem of the fact that he's playing a game of checkers in what has internationally become a game of chess.
Three-dimensional chess, in fact. He doesn't seem able to really understand, and maybe he doesn't care to, but he doesn't seem to understand really how this stuff works. And I just remember a very quick story. Back in the early 90s, when Mandela was released from prison, took a tour of New York. And I remember at a town hall meeting, I think it was Ted Koppel that was interviewing him, and said that he had concerns. He was wondering, does Mandela have concerns about his relationships with certain countries, including Cuba? And Mandela said, you know what? These countries were with me even when the U.S. was not. Your enemies are not my enemies. And it really crystallized something in my head, which is that if you layer it with what's happening today, there are going to be alliances formed around the world based on what Donald Trump is saying. And when he then, and understanding the power of this country is significant, but the question is, can these places freeze him out and freeze out American interests because he's playing this game that he doesn't know how to win? And that is the three-dimensional chess that we're talking about. And that should worry both Democrats and Republicans, because there is so much going on economically around the world that the president and his allies just don't seem to be able to keep up with.
There's a lot that you say there, Basil, that could produce a whole nother segment just around the idea of the relationships that could be formed or broken by what Trump does now.